Thanks, Mohammed. Yeah, no, that was, the connection with Mohammed is a testament to Facebook. Facebook has been extremely useful for us in the last months as the Syrian refugee crisis has come into the news. You've heard a lot about refugees. And so I just want to take a little bit of time to maybe fill in some of the gaps of what's not being talked about in the media, things that you're missing out on, the fuller picture of how refugees end up coming to the United States, and specifically how refugees end up arriving to Seattle. Washington State had about 2,500 refugees come last year. They're expecting those numbers to go up in the next year. And at World Relief, we resettled almost 800 refugees. So this is a large population that's coming in, and there are needs that need to be met. But I want to first give you some background on who we're actually talking about. So when you guys think of refugees, you know the story of Syrian refugees, but more generally, we are talking about people that are facing persecution and that are having to cross over an international border, okay? So what are some things that you can think of that people might be fleeing in terms of persecution? What might they be being persecuted on the basis of? Okay, religion. What else? Ethnicity, excellent. Okay, sexual orientation, yes. War, usually, more specifically political, some sort of political persecution. So you guys nailed most of them. These are the categories that the United Nations uses to define a refugee. So when you hear about refugees in the news, it's important to contextualize that. The UN has a rigorous process by which it determines if a person really is a quote-unquote refugee. They have to prove that they have been persecuted on the basis of religion, race, nationality, membership in a social group, that would be sexual orientation, for example, or political opinion. Notably, what is missing from this? Can you think of anything that makes people cross borders that is not here? What was that? Economic reasons, okay. Notably, people who cross over a border for economic reasons do not qualify for refugee status, okay? Another thing would be natural disasters. If you're fleeing because there was a hurricane in your home, you do not qualify for refugee status, okay? So this gives us context for who we're talking about. Let's talk about the numbers. Largest refugee crisis since World War II. That's what we're in the midst of right now. How many people do we think there are displaced from their homes worldwide? It's about 60 million, okay? Of those 60 million, we have a couple different words. We have about 38 million that are internally displaced. So that means if I have been persecuted against in Seattle and I flee to Spokane, I am what's called an internally displaced person. I know, it was a terrible flight. I had to really get from one great place to another great place and ended up in Spokane. So 38 million people in the world are experiencing something like that. Just about 20 million are refugees, so that means they've actually gone through the process of crossing over an international border. Why are these people given priority? A lot of it is because if you've gotten to the situation where you're willing to cross out of your country, the logic is that you must be in some significant kind of danger, okay? Oftentimes in situations like the Syria crisis, they have to be able to get to a place where it's safe enough for UN workers to even be. Unfortunately, the people that are oftentimes in the most danger aren't able to get out of their own country. So there we have 20 million refugees. We also have asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are a small percentage. An asylum seeker is a person who comes into the United States without any sort of permission to be here and says, this is my situation and I'm going to petition for asylum to stay here. In the meantime, where do they go while they're waiting for asylum? Jail. Yeah. The Immigration Detention Center in Tacoma, where World Relief also works, houses about 1,500 people. A high percentage of those people are asylum seekers. Sometimes they'll stay there for over a year just waiting for their case to get through the court system. Okay. One important stat, this is not something that you hear in the media because the perception is that refugees are coming in this huge wave and that we're overwhelmed by them. The reality is that of the 20 million refugees worldwide, less than half of 1% are ever resettled into a country like the United States or a European nation, okay? What this means is that the people who are arriving as refugees to the United States are have the most compelling stories of persecution and have proven time and again that what they're saying is true and that they are in true danger for their lives. Okay. You might have seen this in the news. This was a big deal back in September when the president and Congress set the president set the new levels of refugees being welcomed. The U.S. is welcoming more refugees. We welcomed 70,000 last year, expecting about 85, and then 100,000 in the coming years. To contextualize that, in 1980, when we were seeing folks coming largely from Vietnam and Cambodia, 200,000 refugees were resettled by the United States. So these numbers still pale in comparison to what this country is capable of doing and what it has done in the past. And you can see even in Washington state, you had in 1980, 8,000 refugees, and in 2014, and again in 2015, only about 2,500. So we make the argument at World Relief that there is the capacity to resettle more refugees, that there is an economic benefit to the states that do that, and that there is a heritage of it that we should be remembering. That the folks who came over here in the 80s look at the benefit that they have been to the community, and so let's get that same spirit again. Refugees can be really varied. We hear about in the news, we're hearing about folks from Syria. We hear about fear of everyone coming over being males of military age, which is total crap because that's not statistically true. Yes, there are males of military age, but refugees come from a wide variety of different countries, different ages, and lots of different professions. We have people from doctors to people who have never held a formal job. Okay, you have folks, again, with a college education or a master's degree, and you have folks who are illiterate in their first language. So it is a hugely varied population, which is part of what makes it super interesting, right? Refugee work is extremely interesting. This gives you just a taste for what we at World Relief do in a given week. Every single week, we welcome new families at SeaTac Airport. Essentially, the State Department assigns families once they are given clearance by the UN. The State Department assigns them to a city and to an agency in that city. There are 5 different agencies working in Seattle. World Relief is the largest by number of resettlement. Other ones are IRC, Lutheran Family Services, some organizations you might have heard of. This week, on Monday, we're welcoming, that would be yesterday, a single SIV case from Afghanistan. SIV, does anybody know what SIV is? This has been in the news some. What was it? It's not. It's not a virus. It does sound like a virus. I've never thought of that. It is a special immigrant visa. Okay, so special immigrant visas are given to folks from Afghanistan and Iraq that worked for the U.S. military in some capacity. This is exceptional because they do not have to cross over an international border. The danger is so high for them that they're given priority and can fly into the United States and petition for refugee status based on their involvement with the U.S. military. That is a very interesting guess, though. Tuesday, that is today, we have a family of 7 arriving from Afghanistan. And then tomorrow, we're going to have a family of 5 from Ukraine, a family of 3 from Ukraine, and a family of 5 from Afghanistan. Okay? So this gives you a context for the variety of different people that are coming in and how many are coming in a given week. And there is the breakdown in 2015 of where people were coming from. Notably, you will not see Syria even on that list. We welcomed our first Syrian family in the fiscal year of 2016. It was a family of 8, and actually that was how Muhammad and I made our first connection. And the support from the community has been absolutely incredible for that Syrian family. And what we want at World Relief is we want every family, whether it be a family from Iraq, a family from Somalia, a family from Ukraine, to get the same sort of support that that Syrian family is getting, to have American friends that are welcoming them, to have folks that are helping furnish their apartment, to have people there in the first months to help give them some financial assistance, but more importantly, to get them connected to the community, to get them English skills, and to get them good jobs. Okay? So you can see the wide variety of countries that we're working with. Iraq and Afghanistan, those folks, and Somalia are folks that have all been coming for quite a while. Ukraine in the last year was a population that shot up a lot. That was largely because of what was happening in Crimea and because Ukrainians have a lot of ties already in the United States, so it is a faster process for them to come here. If you guys have questions at any point, feel free to like shout them out. We will have some time for questions. Yeah.
So where do they go in the United States before they actually arrive in Seattle? Like, where are they staying, either in asylum or before they're relocated?
We'll talk a little bit more about how they actually get to the United States, but once they're in the United States, they're literally just hopping from an airport. There's 5 airports where they would come in, and then oftentimes it's just like a 24-hour plus journey. But once they get into the United States, they're immediately coming to SeaTac. And we've been contacted a few weeks prior, know that they're coming, and meet them at the airport. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, are any arriving outside of World Relief? Yeah, there are 9 different agencies around the country and 5 here in Seattle. And so we all are assigned folks. And there is some, for example, part of the reason that folks might come to Seattle, if you have a highly vulnerable medical situation, those people are more likely to be placed in Seattle because of the quality of healthcare here. So there are considerations made where people are placed in the country, but the most important factor is whether you have some tie in the city, okay? So if you have a family member or a friend that can help you resettle, that would be the most important factor, yeah. Okay, I want to give you just a little bit more of the process, because this is something that I think probably has been the biggest gap in media coverage as the refugee crisis has emerged, is the actual process by which refugees overseas end up in the United States. So refugees have good lives, okay? Refugees have they have families, they have home countries, they have places they love. And this is something that at the end, when I encourage you to actually meet some refugees and become friends with them, this is something that you can't really learn unless you get to know them, okay? These people have full lives. And because of persecution, because of who they are, they're forced to flee. Another misrepresentation of refugees is that they largely are fleeing to refugee camps, okay? Some sort of makeshift tents that are set up and are squalid conditions. Certainly, there is that, especially at the beginning. In the case of Syrian refugees, for example, the UN is reacting, and it is pretty crappy conditions. But the majority of refugees, about 2 out of 3 refugees worldwide, is actually living in an urban setting. Okay, this is a protracted situation that will, on average, last 8 years. On average, the average refugee, once they've fled, waits 8 years before they're granted resettlement in a country like the United States. In the meantime, most of them will be working illegally. Their children won't be able to go to school. They may be in danger because folks in that country don't want to host them. So this is it's important to remember that refugees are not just in camps; they're in cities and they're working. If you are fortunate enough to get an interview with the United States, it will be one of a host of steps. If you want more information on what these steps are, I'm not going to pass it out, but you guys can come up afterwards. This is a double-sided sheet of the 13 security screenings that a refugee goes through before they come to the United States, okay? They're screened by the FBI, they're screened by the USCIS, they're screened by the State Department, they're screened by DHS, and quite frankly, if they wanted to come in and do any terrorist activities, they're fools to try and do it through the Refugee Resettlement Program. Okay? There are much better ways to come in here and do your heinous acts. Tourist visa and a student visa come to mind. Okay? So the interview process is long and arduous. There are biometric tests. There are DNA tests so that you have to prove that the people you're with, who you say is your family, are actually your family members. Okay? The screening is robust. If you are one of the lucky less than 0.5% of refugees who is chosen for resettlement in a country like the United States, you will arrive to the airport and you'll be met by someone at World Relief or a different agency who will take you back to your home. You will arrive at the airport in debt. Okay, what do you think you would be in debt for? What was it? Plane flight. Yeah. You pay back your ticket if you're a refugee. So, in the case of a family of 8 that comes from Syria, I don't know quite how much one ticket from Syria costs, but it's north of $1,000. So welcome to the United States. You are $10,000 in debt. Okay, so that is a situation that refugees are facing, and while the repayment is patient, it's constant. And I know refugees who are a decade out and still paying off their travel loan because of just the amount of money that it was up front. You arrive. That was the grim news. You arrive, and there are people smiling and welcoming you at the airport. There's the happy news. At World Relief, we take people back to an apartment that we've furnished with their help. In some cases, we're not able to get an apartment right away. As you can understand, in the housing situation of Seattle right now, it is really, really competitive. And trying to tell someone to take someone in who has no job, no rental history, no credit, and isn't even in the country yet is challenging. So sometimes we look to host homes. If you have a home that you're interested in welcoming up on a short-term basis, it's usually for between 2 days and 2 weeks, I'd be interested in talking with you. Because of the difficulty of finding refugees housing, we are becoming much more dependent on folks to give temporary host homes to refugees. And that connection is one that lasts. It's nice because you can do it from different areas of Seattle. One thing we haven't talked about is where the majority of refugees are being resettled, which is not in Seattle because Seattle's too expensive. But as a host home, you could have refugees be in your area. And then begins the process of resettlement after you've arrived. I am not going to go over resettlement in too much depth because you can ask me the questions that you want. In short, the resettlement process is short, okay? The resettlement process is contracted for between 3 and 6 months with the United States, with a couple different agencies at the federal government and the state government level. In those 3 to 6 months, refugees need to get their English up to a level where they're able to get a job. They need to do a job search. They need to get their kids in school, get connected to social services, and adjust to a different culture at the same time. It is a total myth to think that that happens in 3 to 6 months. We at World Relief are focused on the bare minimum of getting people into stable housing, getting them enough English to survive, and finding them a job that pays their bills. After that, we look to the community. A huge part of what we do is we empower people in the community to come alongside refugees for the long haul, okay? There are so many different needs that you don't even really conceive of until you've been with a refugee that come up years down the road. And it's kind of fun to like be able to walk with a refugee and see the United States through someone else's eyes. It's like, oh, yeah, I guess it is kind of weird, like the whole process of applying for college, you know? Like, great, you've been here for 4 years, but you don't even know how to apply for college. Let's try and do that together. We are focused entirely on self-sufficiency, okay? So what does this look like? In the context of teaching a refugee how to get to their job, we could get a volunteer to take them on a regular basis in a car to their job. After 3 to 6 months, though, the reality is that volunteer might not be able to help them. So our job is to teach them the bus, even if it's at 4 a.m. in the morning and they have to go from Kent to Redmond. We're going to teach you how to take the bus. If there is no bus, we will show you how to bike to work, if that's necessary, okay? It's about getting people in a situation where when we step out of the picture, they are self-sufficient. But we need a lot of help with that. One way that we ask people to help is with a program called Cultural Companionship. This is a committed program for 6 months where an American individual or small group is matched up with a specific refugee family, okay? We have, like I said, north of 800 people arriving this year. That's probably 200, 250 families that will come in. That's 250 families who could really use an American friend to negotiate strange things in the culture, just to come in and have someone to hang out with and talk with. And so I would encourage you, even if you can't do this, commit to a weekly basis. Maybe you have a small group of friends. There's 4 of you, and you say, each of us could go and visit this family once a month, okay? I want to be straightforward in the geographic barrier. The majority of refugees are settling in the Kent, Tukwila, Auburn, Renton area. Why? it's cheaper, right? And it's hardly even cheap enough for refugees to live at this point. We're having to look a lot farther. Federal Way, Puyallup is becoming common. But I would encourage you not to let that geography be too much of a barrier. I live in Columbia City. I've lived in Seattle for 5 years, and I commute to Kent. Kent's not that bad, actually. It's not that far. It's half an hour. You could like, I don't know, from here to the wrong part of Ballard might take just as long at the wrong time of day. So it's physically farther, but time-wise, it's not all that bad. So that's one opportunity that I want to bring to your attention. Another opportunity I want to bring to your attention, we have our second annual See Try Can bike ride. What do you think See Try Can stands for? Seattle is the first one. Tri-Cities is the second one. Spokane is the third one, okay? So we're having a benefit bike ride, and it is a challenging adventure. We are biking from Seattle to the Tri-Cities to Spokane. It's 400 miles in 5 days, and it's happening June 10 to 14. You have plenty of advance notice to get in shape, and you have plenty of advance notice to ask off from work, okay? So we are looking for a few good folks to commit to this. We have early registration running through the end of February. The funds that are raised through the bike ride, it is a fundraiser bike ride. The funds that are raised through the bike ride go to our refugee employment program, okay? So all those funds will go to ensure that refugees, when they come in, have employment services. That is somebody that helps them put together a resume, do job training preparation, and do preparation for an interview, and then connect them to jobs eventually. So there's the website. There's a training plan on that website. We have some discounts if you get a group of 4 of you together. We'll have some discounts on how much you're paying for the registration. But I would encourage you to check out See Try Can. If you don't bike, right on. If you do bike, right on. Tell people about it though. We're trying to get 25 riders, not a ton. Okay, we're looking for people that are committed to it. Last year we had 12. We're trying to double that this year. Okay. Another thing. Oh, that was fancy. I didn't even know we did that. Maybe go back. No, it didn't show up. There's a link. Financial support. Like I said, we believe that refugees are an economic benefit to this city. Okay, there are studies that show that refugees start and hold businesses better than the average population. They're ambitious and they're entrepreneurial. They have gone through risks that most of us have not, and so taking those steps. And what I've seen firsthand is I'm always surprised with the risk that refugees will take because they're like, shoot, I didn't have anything. I lost everything, so let's try it. Refugees' children outperform their peers in school, okay? So we believe, and there's a lot of research that I'd be happy to share with you at some point on the benefit of having refugees come. Certainly, it is a humanitarian act, okay? It is saying that the suffering of these people is too much, and we are going to step up to help some of them. Like I said, we're only going to have 800 people come this year. That is out of 20 million worldwide. But if we can help those 800 people, we're doing an economic good for our city, and we're doing the humanitarian and the right thing, right? So you can see a couple examples of what financial support can do. $8 pays for English class supplies for one student. $55 pays for transportation for one refugee for a month. Okay, that's huge. That gets them to their job, gets them to English class. Lots of good stuff. $385, that would pay, I'd say welcome kits, that would pay for all the household goods for a family of 4. You're literally putting money into a refugee's pocket when you do that, okay? So those are just a few ideas. If you want to do that, it is on there. I don't see it up on my screen. Okay, there's the website. Awesome. I am going to stop talking and leave you guys. We have like 7 minutes or so. I think, yeah. Oh, there's contact info, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to stop talking. Mohammed has a mic. If you guys have questions, I will do my best to answer them. Or you can yell.
Just a quick question. Do you guys take like furniture donations?
Yeah, we do. Gently used. That's our term. And do I have it? Sorry. The contact info for that is the bottom, seattlegik@worldrelief.org. So yeah, we do. We take furniture. And we do pickups. We're not like Goodwill. Like we're pretty picky, but we do pickups.
So I had a question about the start of the process, the like kind of getting into the U.S.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, I guess people apply, and then how do they actually get selected? I guess I have a two-part question. Like, how do people actually get the interview with the U.S.? And then what percentage of people who make it that far actually get rejected because of one of the variety of checks versus just we have this many slots, and so we rolled the dice, you won the lottery, you didn't win the lottery?
Okay. I'll plead ignorance maybe on a little bit of the second question. The first question, the United Nations refers people to the U.S. So the United Nations kind of does the initial vetting, and they say, we think this is a really compelling case. We've done our vetting, which is like ensuring that their story is true. Now you, the U.S., can come in and question them and do your research. The second question on how much of it is due to security screenings, I don't have a percentage. Certainly, we hear a lot of reports, especially with certain populations. The security screenings are a lot more rigorous for folks from Iraq, Syria, and Somalia specifically, and so a lot are weeded is a cruel term, but weeded out in that process. But then, yeah, just because of the sheer numbers, there's a pipeline of thousands of refugees that have gone through all these security screenings, have gone through medical screenings, are ready to come in, and we're not welcoming that many people. And a lot of times in that process of waiting, your medical screening expires or your background check expires, so you get to go through the whole pipeline again. Yeah.
Yeah, my question was, I think you said 1% of refugees end up resettled in a country like the U.S. What happens to the rest? Do they go home? Do they stay in the cities?
Yeah, good question. We always talk about kind of the priority, okay? The best thing that can possibly happen is that the situation in the home country where the refugee fled from is repaired and they can go home. The second best situation is that they can be settled in that country where they fled to. Oftentimes, it makes more sense culturally, language-wise, and if things do improve in the future, they can return to their home country. The absolute last resort for very few people is to be resettled. So most of the time, people who don't get into the United States or Europe stay in that country that they fled to, or if things improve enough in their home country, they return to their home country.
My question would be, like, why is that fewer refugees in Seattle area? If we compare to the United States level, it's about 1%. And if we compare to other rich countries, like, let's say in Germany, they expect to get like 1 million this year.
Yeah, so good question. Historically, Washington State has actually been quite generous in refugee resettlement compared to most states. I haven't done the math on like the 1% like thing, and it's to some extent it's a negotiation between the State Department and the states. To some extent, the State Department tells organizations these people are coming, prepare for them, and they have that power. And so when you hear all the news about governors saying they're not going to welcome refugees, the truth is they don't have that power legally. They can make it really damn uncomfortable for refugees to come, but they can't tell them you can't come. That's lies of the federal government. So you asked about why not that many in Seattle? Yeah, I am a total advocate for welcoming more refugees. I think you need to do it. It's the humanitarian, it's the right thing to do, right? You need to do it in a way that's responsible, though, and we do need to be prepared. So if we had a ramping up tomorrow, if we had a doubling of the refugee resettlement program tomorrow, organizations like ours would be challenged. You have to scale it up gradually. But we think that we could do that. Countries like Germany, it's quite a different comparison because of the geographic reality, okay? We fly people in, we vet them before they come. Germany knows that they're gonna deal with people coming across the border, so they have to deal with it in a different way. I applaud them. I think Angela Merkel should be absolutely the person of the year for that. But in some ways, the comparison is fallacious because of the geographic differences. So I would be an advocate for more people coming in the States, but in doing it scaling it up in a responsible way. Any other? Yeah.
I was just curious, how does an organization like World Relief work, like financially? Like, for example, how do you get paid and stuff?
Thank you. Great question. The 86% of our funding comes from the government. 86% of our funding comes from the government, and that limits what we can do. We think we could do stuff a lot more efficiently without the bureaucracy that holds us down in a lot of ways. That's a combination, I should say, of federal, state, and local government. But the more that we diversify that, we have ideas for things that we could be doing with refugees locally that we think would be beneficial both to the community and to refugees that we just don't have the capacity to do because of money. So we are constantly trying to bring more people in on the private side giving. We think, again, that there is some moral obligation even, we might say, for the city to, if the city is gonna welcome these people in, we need to have the support structures that actually give them a shot at succeeding, both for our own sake, but for their sake. And so we are constantly looking for more revenue sources. The majority of it right now is government. If you guys want to get any more information, please feel free to come up to the front. I'd love to talk to you individually. Like I say, tell people about the bike ride. I have some posters if you want to post it anywhere. That's coming up in June. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, Andrew, for coming today.